We are back for a bonus episode on this engine damage problem from part 1. So while I was doing the editing in the last video, I was thinking, you know what? There was a whole other half of this engine that we haven't even looked at that could have that catastrophic engine damage that we were hoping for. So what we're going to do in this video is we are going to do the same thing as in the last video. We're going to do a leak down test and see if we can diagnose what the condition is on that bank and take it apart and dissect it and see if what we find matches what we found on the leak down test. Well, as you can see, I was busy yesterday removing the engine from the car. We already removed this first cylinder head, so what we're going to do is just get right to a leak down test on this cylinder head. Now, of course, because we no longer have the timing chain attached, there really is only two ways we can do the leak down on this cylinder head. One would be to manually crank the camshafts to move each cylinder into a position where both valves are closed. The other way would be to just remove both camshafts. That would make all the valves closed on all cylinders, and I think that's the method we're going to use. If I could look at that spark plug, I could have diagnosed this engine. Oh, really? All right, there you go. Looks like regular ass spark plugs. The Haynes manual says when it overheats, it's going to have a white blistered electrode. Yeah, okay. You know, there is actually a name for people that read spark plugs for diagnosis. They're called parts changers. Okay, so our two options now are I can either get a ratchet and manually crank these cams so that all of the valves are in a closed position, or even easier, and the way I'm going to do it is just to go ahead and remove the camshafts altogether. Without the camshafts in place, of course, all of the valves are going to be closed. And, wow, you know what? Actually, if we look at this, take a look at this. This is actually kind of interesting. All right, hopefully the camera parallax will show this, but it just happens to be, we're on the intake cam here, and it just happens to be that all of the valves on this cylinder head are already in a closed position. Let me see if I can get the other ones for the exhaust cam there. The egg-shaped part is on this intake is just about to hit the valve here. They're all the way in the back here, straight up, facing straight up here. You can see these are definitely pointing almost straight up. These are facing straight at you, not yet opening. It's just coming off of the exhaust valve here. We probably don't have to remove these camshafts, and we can just go right to the leak down test. Yeah, we could just, I do believe we could just go ahead with the leak down test, but you know what? We have to remove these camshafts in order to get the cylinder head off of the block anyway. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove them. It'll just take a minute, and it'll just guarantee that all of our valves are in a fully closed position. Well, I'm not sure if the position of these cams may indicate that maybe the cams were forced into this position by the pistons hitting the valves. But that is kind of curious. It also would indicate that because all of the valves are closed, that we would have less likelihood of engine damage on this side. So I'm not quite sure which it is. All right, without our cams in place, these valves will all be guaranteed fully closed unless they have some kind of damage to them. So let's get our leak down tester. All right, we'll start with number 1. And again, I don't expect that we are going to see any compression. Technically, I guess I don't really need the gauge, do I? But we'll just use it in case there is some compression in one of these cylinders. All right. We had no rotation of the engine at all. See, we got very high leak down. We can hear air coming out somewhere. Let's see. So real easy to check because I can actually put my finger over the intake valve. I don't feel it there. Put it over the exhaust valve. There it is. Feel a little bit out of the exhaust valve. You can actually hear the air change. Put my microphone here. When I put my fingers in, you can hear as I block that exhaust valve. You know what? It sounds like there's air also coming out of the adjacent cylinder. Oh yeah, there is. Yeah, you can absolutely feel air is also coming out of the adjacent cylinder. Can show that real easily. I'm going to put this little cap on here. You'll watch as it skirts away as the air blows it. It's kind of floating like a air hockey puck a little bit. You can also hear it. You can hear as I cover the opening, you can actually hear a little bit of a pop as pressure has built up in there. All right, that's our first cylinder that shows two compromises there. So we can go to this middle cylinder. We didn't check the middle cylinder in the last video, did we? But we can test it on this one. We know it's going to send air back to cylinder number 1. That we know. But we'll see if it leaks anywhere else too. And then when we take the head off, we can confirm what we saw. All right, full leak down. And it sounds like this time it's coming through the intake. Oh yeah. Definitely can hear it through the intake. We'll just put the microphone right at the intake port for you. Pretty unmistakable. Definite large intake leak here. And you can feel the air, of course, coming out of the number 1 as well. All kinds of problems going on here. Just curious if it's also coming out of the exhaust too. And it sounds to me like some is also coming out of the exhaust valve, but I can't really be 100%. So what I'm going to do, you just use water or whatever. I'm going to spray a little carb cleaner because it's handy. Oh yeah, and you can hear it. So let me give you a listen. Hear it kind of gurgling a little bit in there. Yep. So that one's leaking everywhere. This head seems in much worse shape than the first one, doesn't it? All right, let's do our final leak down test. All right, see we got full leak down. This is coming out of the intake for sure. Yeah, it's actually even blowing up some little cruddies. Definitely out of the intake. Don't feel it on the adjacent cylinder. Let's check the exhaust. I hear some coming out of the exhaust. But man, the majority of it for sure coming out of the intake. It's actually blowing some little particles out. Yeah, you can absolutely feel it. We'll give you a listen. There's at the intake. And you can hear a little bit at the exhaust. All right. You know what we forgot to do is listen at the oil pan. But you know what? If there's damage to the piston, we're going to see it anyway. Definitely we know we've got some valve damage for sure. Or at least the valves aren't seating correctly. That's what happened on the last cylinder head. I don't know that it was struck by the piston, but one of the exhaust valves was definitely not seating properly, I believe due to the cylinder head warp. We're going to definitely see a warp in the cylinder head between 1 and 2. We're definitely going to see that. or damage between it, but more likely a warp, I believe. And we'll see if we got evidence that we banged into some valves here. All right, I wonder if this DeWalt is going to be strong enough to remove some cylinder head bolts. Oh, wow. Look at that. Nah, just kidding. I already broke them loose before I started. All right, in taking off this cylinder head, this is not going to disappoint. We have some catastrophic damage. So if we look here on, this will be number 1, I believe, if I remember correctly. We don't have any damage or anything on the piston. See, it's at top dead center there. Let me bring up number 2 now. Well, actually, you know what? The next one that came up is number 3, and I want to show you something very interesting. Let's look back at number 1, and I want you to kind of get an impression of the color of the piston, kind of this copper color here. Then we're going to look at number 3 on the far end. That's this piston, and look at the color of it, by the way. It almost looks like plastic. It's completely black. Absolutely has a wicked, smooth feel to it. It almost feels like it's different material. Not quite sure what to make of that. I don't know that it'll clean off, but I'm wondering if that has something to do with the temperature. But there's no damage to the piston at all. So we're going to look at the one in the middle here next and check this out. This is cool. Check this out. We have some kind of hole punched through the piston or something. You can actually see behind the piston crown. There's a big chunk of the piston missing right there. Now, not sure yet whether that was from a valve causing that damage. The valve recesses are in front of it, so I don't believe the valve hit that. But we got a piece of the piston actually missing right there. That's super cool. Let's go look at the cylinder head. All right, we finally got our catastrophic damage. So let's see if we can find anything on this cylinder head that matches it. So one thing that's interesting is over here. If we look over here, we got that same deep black discoloration as we did on the piston crown. So not quite sure what to make of that, but yeah, it's got a really wicked, slick, smooth feel to it. Looking at the center here, I don't see any damage on the intake or exhaust valves. Let's see, which side was that? That was on the exhaust valve side, so we can look at the exhaust valves. They don't look like they've had any damage, but what I can tell you is there is a divot taken out between the exhaust valves. There's also one here, a huge one here. Let's get a look at that. So if you look on this good one, there's a nice sharp peak between the exhaust valves. Looking over here, it's broken off. It's very rough. Not sure what happened to the piece there. And then on the one next to it here, man, that may actually be broken into the valve seat. That's probably broken into the valve seat. Yeah, hopefully you can see that, but there is just a big chunk missing right there, as opposed to over on this side, where we got this nice peak between the valves. Wow, that's got to be broken into the seat, and thus the reason why we have leak there at the exhaust. Okay, let's check this thing for warp. And oh my God, it's a bigger warp than on the last one. It's gigantic. Let me get a light to put behind the ruler. Look at that. That is absolutely ridiculous. Let me get a better angle. All right, let's get that light behind it. Oh my God, look at that. Under the ruler. That's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. That is far and away the worst warp I've ever seen. Nothing on the back of the head, but boy, you move up to that. Look at that. That's just crazy. Oh my gosh. Awesome. Well, we got the worst warp I've ever seen, and we got catastrophic damage to a piston. Hey, today was a pretty good day.